Now the rules around carry forward can be quite complex, but if we start at the beginning and we talk about first of all your annual allowance, you can pay a maximum of either £40,000 or 100% of your salary. This is known as annual allowance, and this is what you'll get tax relief on. So depending on your tax rate, for every £100 that you contribute to your pension, you'll receive either 20%, 40% or 45% tax relief on those contributions. Now, you can increase your pension contributions above the annual allowance limits, and this is known as carry forward. So if you haven't maximised your pension contributions in the last 3 years, this could be an excellent way of boosting your pension contributions. You can increase your pension contributions above the annual allowances. This is if you haven't fully funded in the previous tax years. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to take advantage of those carry forward rules and boost your pension. So, if you haven't been able to maximum fund your pension up to the 40,000 limit, the good news is you can utilise this allowance in subsequent tax years. Now, you need to bear in mind that the contributions you make in a given tax year cannot exceed your annual income. For example, if you wanted to contribute £50,000 into your pension, you will need to have earned at least £50,000 in that tax year. If you have a significant amount of money that you want to put into pensions, if it exceeds your salary, you may have to stagger this over subsequent tax years. Remember, you should adhere to the rules. If you exceed the allowances, you're effectively going to have a tax charge which negates any of the tax relief you would have had. So let's revisit pension annual allowance. So what is it? That is the maximum amount you can put into your pension in a given tax year, and as we've already said, it's the maximum of either 100% of your salary or 40,000. Now, one of the things that I think is massively unfair, this annual allowance has stood at 40,000 since the 2014-15 tax year, which I think is outrageous. So how do you transfer that unused allowance forward? There are some rules that you need to meet for you to be able to do that. So number one, for you to be able to utilise carry forward, the first thing you need to have done is fully fund and utilise your allowances for the current tax year. Number two, for you to be able to use carry forward, you must have unused allowance from previous tax years, in fact the previous 3 tax years. To utilise carry forward, number 3, you must at least earn the income equivalent to the contribution that you want to make if you are employed. Now the rules for company directors and if you own a company are slightly different, and we'll cover those shortly. So here are one of the rules that sometimes catches people out. For you to utilise unused pension allowance from previous tax years, you needed to be a member of a registered pension scheme. So if you've never contributed or you don't have any pension arrangements in place for previous tax years, you will not be able to use carry forward. And if you are going to use carry forward, because we can go back 3 years, we would always recommend, and we always start with going back to that furthest year first. And finally, if you are a higher earner, you may be affected by what's called taper relief. And taper relief has a big impact on the contributions that you're allowed to make, and we'll talk about that later. So what do you need to do first? Well, what you need to do is check exactly what unused pension allowance that you have. Now, the government has a link to allow you to go on and run the calculation and put the numbers in yourself, or simply you can contact your pension providers and you can check exactly what you contributed in the current tax year and the previous 3 tax years. Here's an example of a table that shows you how to calculate carry forward allowance and what the unused allowance is. So on this example that we're running through now, Anne has had a big bonus and she wants to make a contribution to her pension of £75,000 in the current tax year. She's already contributed £15,000 this tax year. So what can Anne carry forward? If we look at the table, you can see that her annual allowance in the last 4 years, including the current tax year, was £40,000. We can see the contributions that she's made are £85,000, and there's unused allowance over those years of £75,000. So 75,000 is the additional amount that Anne could contribute to her pension. Now, as long as she's earning £90,000, then she can make that contribution, because that's the 15,000 she's already contributed with the additional 75 that she's going to utilise using carry forward. If you're a high earner, you need to be mindful of tapered annual allowance, which was brought in April 2016. If you earn in excess of 240,000, for every £2 that you earn, your pension allowance will be reduced by £1. This will be down to a floor of £4,000 per annum. So what that means, if you have earnings over £312,000, the maximum you can contribute to your pension is £4,000. This would obviously massively affect and impact the amount you can use and pay into your pension, including any carry forward. Now, carry forward is particularly useful for self-employed and directors of limited companies. If you're self-employed, it gives you the freedom and the flexibility that if you've had a good year, you can make additional pension contributions, and maybe when years aren't so good and the profits aren't coming through, it allows you to make smaller contributions to give you the ability to catch up with those further down the line. So it gives self-employed people a great degree of flexibility when it comes to their pension funding. If you run a limited company, it's even more flexible. As we've already mentioned, the contribution is limited to the income that you take. However, a company can make a employer contribution and it's not subject to the income cap. So for example, if you're running a limited company and you've only taken income of £20,000 in that tax year, your company can still make a pension contribution of £40,000 on your behalf. In this case, the contributions would be classed as a business expense and they would get relief against corporation tax. So if you're considering increasing your pension contributions, there are options out there. You can put bigger contributions in, but as hopefully you've seen, the rules around this do need to be respected and they do need to be considered when you're making these pension contributions. My advice is always seek advice from a professional. They can help you with the calculations and they can ensure that you get the maximum amount of contribution into your pension fund, which ultimately is going to boost your fund and provide a much bigger fund and a much more secure time in your retirement. So I hope that was useful. That was a whistle-stop tour of carry forward, and we touched on tapered annual allowance. Please please subscribe. I'm trying to grow my audience here. I am going to be hopefully delivering lots of value to you over the coming months in terms of financial planning, pensions and tax planning. So it'd be great if you join the community. So give me a like, please subscribe and look after your money, and I will talk to you again very, very soon.